held for a first-class Rotary Club. Here we are. Somebody with the letter R has the invitation and pledge.
Rabondo last week, I got it.
Smith, okay.
Yeah, I got it.
R. Smith.
Please pray with me. May God bless you with discomfort at easy answers, half-truths, and superficial relationships so that you may live deep within your heart. May God bless you with anger at injustice, oppression, and exploitation of people so that you may work for justice, freedom, and peace. May God bless you with tears to shed for those who suffer from pain, rejection, starvation, and war so that you may reach out your hand to comfort them and turn their pain into joy. And may God bless you with enough foolishness to believe that you can make a difference in this world so that you can do what others claim cannot be done. Amen. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
of the things we
Say and do. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned?
I was so excited about my Rotary moment, I just about skipped the four-way test. But 23 years ago, I had a 10-year-old, and this club started. And fast forward 23 years, now he's got a family, and he's got kids, and the summer before he came to work, he said, "You know, I think I'm going to join a Rotary club, Dad." That was when he called me Dad. He said, "I had no idea y'all did that much stuff. I think I'm going to join the Rotary Club." So, that's what happens.
Very good. Great moment, Jonathan.
Yeah.
Let's see, Sergeant at Arms.
Right here.
Lynn.
I can't kind of double fist it here today. All right, so we got 41 members here today, and we have a guest, Brian Kaiser. His name is Jody Clayton.
Yeah, this is Jody Clayton. He's a personal care Inc. I've known him when I was in the home care industry. He was one of my arch competitors. So now that I'm out, he's awesome.
Thank you, Lynn. Birthdays, anniversaries. Kevin.
We have 2 anniversaries as of June 1st. No weddings, no wedding anniversaries, and no birthdays this week, but 2 Rotary anniversaries. June 1st is Mike Conrad, 23 years, and also Mike Allen, 20 years. So congratulations.
Let's see, announcements. Dan Quinn's got something to share with us.
Anybody want to hang around afterwards or have a fundraiser discussion? We had multiple really good options that one by one have gone away, so we still need to come up with a plan. So just after the meeting, we'll step out the hall and see what we can hammer together.
Nice. Thank you, Dan. Beth Sheffield.
Beth, they're calling on you.
Beth. Sorry. Beth has something to present.
Yes. Tom Richardson. Tom. Tom has earned his wings. Those of you that are benefactors know that it's very important to give back to the Rotary Foundation and remember the Rotary Foundation in our passing, and for living on, I guess we should say. And so this is your wings to go on your pin, and then you have a certificate. And thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to remind, if anyone else has not done the paperwork for benefactor, the new members, to please, I'll be contacting you this week.
Yeah, it's a simple paperwork transaction. You basically assure us that you put something in your will to go to the Rotary Foundation. Thank you, Beth. Jonathan Smith and Steve Brennan, come forward. You're not in trouble. You brought in a new member, Brian Kaiser, and Steve was responsible for bringing in Glenn Urlis. And Rotary has recognized you with a pamphlet, and they will help him for your efforts in bringing in a new member. Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Lifeblood of the club. Comes and goes. Any other announcements from the floor? Time for Buster.
It's more like the digestive system of the club. Bring them in, spit them up, chew them up, spit them out. They're all you stuff. Hey.
So she was 6 years old, I think, when I joined the club, and y'all have seen my daughter Emily grow up, and she, y'all sponsored her last year with the Guilford County School Supply Drive, and this weekend she got it again.
Why did you have a guitar at Appalachian State University?
So I was the entertainer.
Yeah, he had the speaker wrapped around.
I had my big nose strapped to my side, and I played music during the
How much did you pay? Yeah, what's up with that? You're hurt. Man.
I visited the Washington, D.C. Rotary Club last week, and just wanted to give a happy dollar for our club, because our club does birthdays, anniversaries, all that fun stuff. They didn't do that there. It was a little more formal, but it was a good club. They gave out $280 in grants to their local nonprofits that day, and so it was, they were handing out checks. $280,000. $280K. Yes. $280. Yeah, we are impressive. So and then yeah, they were doing a lot of good support, but we got them beat as far as birthdays. They didn't have happy dollars.
I literally, what does that say from Ralph Jones?
Where are you? Very late notice, but if you are at Rotary tomorrow, can you please do invocation? 10:30 or 11?
What time was it? What time was it, Randy?
I just got my, I just learned my run.
I wonder what he's doing over at the I got it at 7:19 a.m.
I got you beat.
So it's been another holiday weekend on the soccer field. My daughter's classic team played in the Wrangler tournament, and on paper they probably should have come in, maybe third or fourth, but eked it out. Managed to beat a great team from Lake Norman, and in overtime. So they were Wrangler champions. So happy dollar.
Mary Catherine update. Right now she's on her junior backpacking trip at the GES, the whole junior class is backpacking in Pisgah National Forest. It's been raining and chillier than they anticipated, so that's good for them. And then later this summer, and actually in 3 weeks, Mary Catherine and Susan are going to go to Sri Lanka on a Habitat International build for 2 weeks. And I'm going to be home with the dog, but they're going to be working from 9 to 5, manual labor for 2 weeks in Sri Lanka. They're going to be different when they come back.
You're going to be different.
That dog is going to be.
Like saying 700.
I got $2, but that's not near enough. I got 2 grandson stories. I've got having another grandson, and about 2 weeks ago we found out there were some problems they thought with his heart, and my daughter had to go into a specialist, and we did a lot of praying, obviously, and that all came back wonderful. So that's my blessing. And I also got a motivational speech from my 2-year-old grandson Saturday. He spent the night with us. My wife feeding him, giving him everything, playing in the pool, the deck, everything. Life was great. And he just stands there and goes, "This is a great day. This is the greatest day of my life." I still don't know if you saw it on TV or where, but it's been carrying me through the week. I'm trying to figure out what's going on with it. Really?
This is a happy dollar for, if you're following him on Facebook, David Crabtree has finished his ride across Africa. Wow. And, you know, he just amazes me with his perseverance and his persistence. And if you have a mind to contribute to his cause, I encourage you to do so.
John? That's right. I got one, and it's not nearly enough. Y'all read this piece that Kelly Harrell gave you in the Foundation Progress Report. If you don't have a copy of it, I'll mail you a link. But just the reality that this man in our club listened to his 7th grade teacher and remembered what he wanted to be is just incredible. So Kelly, thank you again.
Good article.
Best thing I've read. Thank you.
Yeah, Jonathan, would you just send that link out?
I will. I will. I started yesterday and I just got balled up, but I'll do it later today. So.
Well, Grandpappy was telling us about a study that he saw. It said that women who put on a few pounds typically live longer than the men who mention.
One other quick announcement, just to let you know, we have 2 leaves of absence in the club. Rob Midget, who actually is here today, but has asked for a leave for a few months. He's just got things going on with business and work so long that we welcome him back. And Rachel Meisterberg has asked for 3 months. She, in her new job, I think, has some training, and it takes place on Thursday mornings is a conflict. But we look forward to having her back in about 3 months, just to let you know what's going on there if you don't see her. Our speaker today is Jim Albright. Jim is a Greensboro native. He graduated from Grimsley High School in 1984, as did his brothers, sisters, and parents. After graduation, he attended the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill and became interested in pre-hospital medicine and fire service, serving with the South Orange Rescue Squad, Orange County EMS, and Carborough Fire Department. Upon graduation from UNC with a degree in economics, he returned to Guilford County and began serving as a paramedic in January 1989. He has held various positions with Guilford County, including EMS captain, EMS assistant shift commander, training officer, administrative officer, deputy director, and was selected as the director in November 2013. He has an MS in accounting from UNCG, is a graduate of the National Fire Academy Staff and Command School, the UNC Charlotte Management Institute, and the Leadership Development Program at the Centers for Creative Leadership. He's married to Kelly and has 3 children, Will, Sarah, and Jack. And the name Albright, I asked Jim, I said, gosh, are you related to any of the Albrights in Greensboro? And of course, they're all Matter of fact, I think this was the family farm, the land that we're on.
Yeah, so you can't sling a cat in Greensboro without hitting an Albright with the last name that's an attorney. So I went to the other side of the fence. They chase you.
They defend me. And so I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to come and speak today. I'm going to talk a little bit about what happens when you call 911, and we're hoping that doesn't occur, but I can tell you the reality is about 68,000 times a year someone picks up the phone with a medical emergency in this community and we respond. So we'll talk a little bit about the services that we provide from emergency services, because there's a real tendency to think of emergency services and think about ambulances. Now I will tell you we're exceptionally proud of that component of our business. It's the most visible billboard of Guilford County services that we provide to this community. If you go up and down Battleground or Windover Avenue, you're going to see yellow and white ambulances all day long. Those yellow and white ambulances have a long and very storied history here, and many of you may remember our long-standing county manager, John Witherspoon, who served for a number of years. I grew up with his daughter, but ultimately he was the one that really put the emergency transportation system on the map, along with a gentleman by the name of Jim Finnison. But that's not the only service we provide. I serve as the fire marshal for Guilford County, and so we coordinate the contracts for rural fire protection. We also provide the investigations and inspections of facilities. We're the people love to see come in the front door, right? Everybody that owns a business loves to see the fire marshal walk in.
You know the difference between God and a fire marshal? God doesn't think he's a fire
County. We are the fire marshal. Actually, the cities of Greensburg and High Point have their own fire marshals.
Jim, I've got 3 extension cords in my Suburban, thanks to your troops.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's temporary use. As long as they're there for temporary use.
Temporary use.
Been replaced by power strips.
But ultimately, we are there to try to keep the public safe. And that really is the hallmark of what we do as an organization. And we also provide emergency management. This is that group of people that you hope you never have to tap into. They're the group that does disaster planning. And in March of this year, March 6th and 7th, we had a fairly significant icing event in this community, and emergency management is the one that coordinates all resources countywide, regardless of the public safety or human service agencies that are involved. We actually partner with over 200 agencies to coordinate a disaster in this community. That particular disaster was federally declared, so we got presidential declaration, etc. And it did not impact the city of Greensboro significantly, but the southeast portion of the county honestly looked tornadic if you went through that area. Number of trees down, etc. Unbelievable storm. Lots of people in that area without power and water for 7 to 10 days. And so how do we provide those kinds of services to those folks? We've been around for a while, so the ambulance service has been here since 1969, and Fire Marshal's office since 1957, and emergency management was relatively new to us. But ultimately, the ambulance service is kind of an interesting story. Prior to 1969, who provided ambulance service in Guilford County?
Undertakers.
The funeral homes. And, you know, quite personally, I'm really good friends with a number of the funeral home guys. Patrick Morris and I grew up together. And I've known Al Lineberry my whole life. Those are nice guys, but there's a conflict of interest. So, actually, in 1967, there was a transition. The funeral homes kind of said, we're getting too busy, and the ambulance service is taking too much of our time. And we really want to concentrate on core business, okay? So all these business principles, they've come full circle. And Al Lineberry has told me a number of times his father was so thankful the day that they gave up the ambulance service. Well, that being said, the county decided that they would contract. And we brought in a company called Brandeis Ambulance. And they contracted for about 2 years. And they threatened to go on strike in March of 1969 if the county didn't increase their wage. And as a result of that, the county said, we never will put the lives of the citizens into a contracted service that puts them in jeopardy. And, you know, when somebody has a medical emergency, a traumatic event, etc., it's the worst event of their life, we want to make sure that we have a service available. And out of that came the ambulance service, and originally called the Emergency Transportation System of Guilford County, because we didn't provide medical care. 1969, there were no standard curriculums other than an American Red Cross first aid course that consisted of 8 hours. Okay, so the original training, very, very low. Current paramedic today receives over 2,000 hours of training, most of that run by us. Quite frankly, we could not find the caliber of employees that we were looking for, and about 12 years ago, our former county manager, Roger Cotton, supported us in the concept of developing our in-house training institution, et cetera, and we've been doing it ever since. But the interesting thing is actually starting in 1907, St. Leo's Hospital also had ambulances. And for a brief period, the Greensboro Fire Department, operating out of Central Station downtown, where the Marriott currently is, also had a rescue squad that could provide emergency transportation. But the predominant provider was the funeral home. So we've certainly grown as a system from these days, although one of the interesting things, this particular base is located at 1339 Headquarters Drive. It's right at 29 Bessemer. And that facility was built in 1972 and we still occupy it to this day. So we want you to make sure that you feel like you got your money's worth out of a facility. Okay, so it had a 30-year serviceable life, should have been replaced about 12 years ago. We're still there every day. But the interesting thing is, when we first started, this was one of 2 bases in Guilford County. So when you called an ambulance, they were either coming from East Greensboro or they were coming from the city of High Point in 1969. Over time, we obviously have grown as a system. We focus a lot of attention on response time, and therefore we have the opportunity now to have ambulances in about 20 locations countywide. One of the questions I often get asked when I do a public forum, I called, my husband was having a heart attack, and a fire truck showed up. So the reason for that is that every fire truck in Guilford County has trained EMTs, which is base level entry into the medical world. There are 106 fire stations in Guilford County, and I have 20 locations that I post ambulances to. So posting means that we temporarily place them there based on areas of high demand, and they respond very, very quickly. We are not station-based like the fire department. We're not the guys that sit at the station routinely. So when you see ambulances moving, they're moving into an area of anticipated demand, and I'll talk a little bit about how that works. Emergency management came out of the civil defense days. Anybody that grew up in Greensboro can remember going downtown and still seeing civil defense signs, and if you went under the old News and Record and several other buildings, we actually have the catacombs of the civil defense Cold War days. They still exist. And so they are still there. They're obviously not maintained, etc. But jurisdictionally, the county has a responsibility to provide emergency management. And we took that responsibility over from a shared use agreement in 2003, and the county does operate that. If you ever get a moment and are surfing the web, go to readyguilford.com. And we have a citizen notification process called Genie that allows you to put in your information, your cell phone, etc. And in an emergency, we have the ability to automatically call you for things like weather emergencies, events in your community. If there's crime in your area and the police need to work with you through reverse 911, etc., it's available. We do have listings for all homes and businesses, so we already have that. But the reality is most people have gone away from home phone service, so we don't have everyone's cellular information. So it can be very helpful for you. And again, that's readyguilford.com. One of the things that we deal with every day is urban sprawl. So just a little bit of the information that's out. If you look at the population densities of the county, obviously we have gone from an urbanized Greensboro and High Point to people living countywide. People will say, well, why does that impact the emergency services? Because quite frankly, if you're having a heart attack, you'd like us there fairly quickly. And we've got to cover 651 square miles, and we do that with one response time standard. We are one of 104 nationally accredited ambulance services in the United States through something called the Commission on Accreditation of Ambulance Services. And those of you that are Greensboro residents should be very proud. We were the first city in the United States that had an accredited police department, fire department, and ambulance service. So the public safety representation here has always been exceptional. The fire department also is ISO Class 1, which is also the highest rating that the insurance services offices provide, and was the first accredited Class 1 fire department in the United States. So we have some really positive things going on in public safety and some issues that you should be very proud of. One of the questions we also routinely get asked is, when I called 911, they asked me a ton of questions. I just wanted an ambulance, okay? I just wanted a fire truck. My house is on fire. Okay, so they are trained emergency medical dispatchers. They are credentialed. They do medical interrogation through a national process that actually is vetted by our local medical director. And they are trained in not only medical interrogation, but also the ability to give pre-arrival instructions. They will talk you through bleeding control, birth, and also CPR and obstructed airway. They can do that over the phone, and we call them the first responders because they're the first ones that touch the 911 event. We do this so that we can stratify the calls. Okay, quite frankly, this system, as I told you earlier, is going to run nearly 70,000 responses this year. We've got to make sure that we've got a priority order in which that we run those calls. So simply a fall with no reported injury is not the same priority as someone that's unconscious and non-breathing. So we need to make sure that we're sending the right resource the right way at the right time. The other piece of that is the most dangerous thing that we do as a job is respond to emergency traffic to try to help people. How many of y'all have ever been caught in traffic and the ambulance or fire truck came up behind you? Your car, you can't hear it, right, until it's right on your bumper, and then those guys got on that air horn, and they wouldn't stop, and I had nowhere to go. They may have been going to somebody that wasn't breathing. And so they're trying to get there as quickly as they can, but we still have to operate with a margin of safety. So we want to make sure we send the right resource the right way. As I told you earlier, we do have a number of different priorities, and ultimately life-threatening, imminent life threats, which are people that are not breathing, people that are hanging and still hanging, people that are underwater and remaining underwater, etc. We're going to try to get to them 90% of the time within 8 minutes and 59 seconds from the time they pick up the phone. That's an incredible goal when you think of us trying to cover 651 square miles and do that in a cost-conscious manner. So we are able to meet these response time standards, and my staff loves it because if we meet them, we'll try to improve them. And so it's a constant, continuous improvement process that we work in this system. An ambulance call or a fire call is exceptionally complicated. These are the intervals associated with an emergency response. And so we all are trained in a technique called Six Sigma. Came out of the manufacturing industry. Many of you are probably trained in it. But one of the things that we look at is process. So how can we improve the response? How can we standardize the care that every patient receives within our system? Of those 70,000 responses, we're going to transport over 50,000 patients. And we want every one of them to have an exceptional patient encounter. Anyone involved in healthcare is very involved in the triple aim now, and quite frankly, we've been involved in the triple aim for a long time. And that's providing excellent quality of care, that's providing an excellent patient experience, and doing it in the most cost-effective manner that we can. How do you argue against that? That is really one of the foundations of healthcare right now. So how do we do this? This is a plot of Guilford County. This is called a thematic map, okay, also called isotherms. Y'all don't care, it's technical. But here's the thing. If I have one ambulance in the system, the greatest likelihood of the next occurrence is in southeast Greensboro. And so we will position an ambulance in such a way that we have an 8-minute response into the largest amount of population base that we possibly can. As we add additional resources into the system, it'll start to cover this particular map. So our 911 operators are what we call system status controllers, and they are like air traffic control. Their job is to constantly be moving these units so that they're in the right spot, so when you call an ambulance, they're there exceptionally quick. Now, I told you earlier, highest priority, we're 859. Greensboro Fire Department's response standard is 5 minutes or less. So in 5 minutes or less, you should have a fire truck pull up to your house, and in 8 minutes or less, you should have an ambulance there as well, under the highest probability of a bad event. Now, out of that, response times are really kind of debated. We know from a customer satisfaction standpoint, fast is good, right? Generally, it doesn't matter. If you fall and break your arm, I don't consider that an emergency, okay? I've dealt with lots of broken bones over the years. Your fractured open forearm is not a huge emergency to me, but it is to you, right? So we always try to get there very, very quickly. We try to aggressively treat, and ultimately we'll provide you some really good care, some narcotic pain relief and and some splinting and some ice, and we'll reassure everyone else that everything's going to be okay. So as we start to cover these landmass areas, you'll notice we get something called a dynamic service area. And again, our job all day is to maximize coverage. And that's 24/7, 365. So our guys are on the street a lot. This is what it looks like if we had the entire system covered with the majority of our post locations. You'll notice that we have a number of them through the central core of Greensboro. So the closest one to us is at Fernwood, right at Battleground in Fernwood, just north of Albright Drive, but right up beyond Cornwallis. We also are in a number of fire stations, so if you see all the red dots on the map, those are the fire stations. And so again, it is a code response when you have an emergency. So when I talk about call volume, we are experiencing a boom in business, okay? And everybody says, well, why is that? Well, it's pretty easy. In healthcare, age is a driver, okay? And as a community, we are aging, and every morning I feel the fact that I am aging when I get up and snap, crackle, and pop, and I see some people going, yeah. Okay, so one of the things that we do is something called service rate demand forecasting. So we take the age of the population from the state demographer, we apply that to service rates for certain populations, and we can tell you basically how many ambulance calls we'll run next year, okay? And we can do that with a margin of about 3%. The issue that we can't do is the distribution of them within the 168 hours of a week. We do a pretty good job of that, but it's not perfect. We are temporal, so we are busiest when you are. Okay, so that makes perfect sense. At 3 o'clock in the morning, you're probably not going to call an ambulance unless it is something very unusual, right? The majority of our business is during the peak times of the day, and obviously 8 a.m., 5 p.m., really busy for us because you add all the motor vehicle accidents on top of all the medical events that also occur. So I think that makes perfect sense. We run somewhere between 150 and 250 calls in a day. March the 7th, during that ice storm, we ran over 400 responses. Okay, we did not predict it well. We didn't realize how deeply impacted the community was, and we also didn't realize how poorly prepared the special needs populations of our community were. There were a number of people in home with ventilators that had no backup power supplies. We had a number of people that had oxygen concentrators. They had backup supplies, but they had no ability to use them. You know, there were a number of things that hit our community. We ended up just absolutely overrun with ambulance calls. It's one of the first times in the history of the ambulance service we were holding calls for service because we don't hold calls. But it was to the point we simply did not have resources to send. One of the real future challenges for us is that we do look at this distribution of age very, very closely. So if you are in your 90s, 60% of the people in the 90 age group, 90 to 100, will be transported by EMS next year. Okay, guaranteed. 60%, 6 out of 10 are going to ride an ambulance. The good news, as you get younger, okay, that percentage does go down, but as a population, 10% of you will be impacted by an ambulance or fire service in this upcoming year. So if we go around the room, 1 in 10. This age population issue, again, huge issue for us. We are growing older as a community, and so we're making sure that we're preparing that. We're trying to ramp up our services. But the other thing that I will tell you is we are at what I consider to be a precipice of redesigning our EMS system. There is a big push right now to look at things like readmissions. So if you're in a hospital, all you hear is about readmission rates and penalties and all this other kind of stuff. Well, one of the issues that we face is that patients are non-compliant. So we're going to work very actively with our home care providers, but also with a group of community paramedicine folks who will go out and try to find ways to improve your health and leave you at home. And that's ultimately the goal of most. If you've been through an injury or illness, people are healthiest when they are at home, which makes no sense, but I've always said for years, hospitals is no place for sick people. Well, the reality is infections and other things can occur, and most people heal best in their own environment. And so we are working very actively to make sure that those opportunities for transitions of care from hospital to home go well, and that we work with things like congestive failure. So I'm in your ballpark, right? But we're going to work together on this, and it's working very well. This is what I mentioned earlier about demand forecasting. So we apply a fairly sophisticated group of metrics to figure out exactly how to staff ambulances. And people are like, well, why do you spend so much time doing all of this? Because I work for government, okay? And so our money is, quite frankly, your money, and we treat it that way. And so one of the things that I'm exceptionally proud of is that I've been able to operate the EMS division of emergency services since 1998 on the same county subsidy that I received in 1998. Now, we do have a fee for service. We do have a fee for service, okay, and I will not tell you that that fee is anything other than quite expensive. Relative to the rest of your healthcare encounter, I think you'll find it of value. But one of the things that you will find is that we operate the ambulance service in Guilford County on less than $4 million county subsidy per year. And that number has continued, as I say, for now 15 years. I'm going into a budget year right now where that's been reduced just slightly more. And we've had to obviously make a number of modifications as a result. We also do have a number of contracted fire services in the county. I actually serve as the county fire marshal and contract with independent corporations for rural fire protection. So those of you that live in the county, if you pay city tax, in your city tax are city services. So city services are police department, fire department, water department, although they charge you again. As a lifelong city resident, I always ask that. And that runoff fee, I'm still not so sure about that. Y'all get a water and sewer guy here. But
We'll get Steve Drew.
in the county, on your tax bill, you will have a line that is specific for the fire district in which you live. And those fire taxes are collected on behalf of the county and distributed 100% to the private corporation for which provides your rural fire protection. And so, as I told you earlier, Greensboro is a Class 1 ISO, High Point is a Class 2 ISO, and in the county, you'll notice the numbers are higher. That's to be expected because on every corner in Greensboro, within 500 feet of each other, are fire hydrants. If you live in the county, they have to establish rural water supplies. They have to bring it on trucks, big trucks, and they have to go into people's ponds and lakes and etc. to be able to generate water. As a result of that, one of the #1 issues in fire is having adequate water supply. #2 is adequate manning. We are at a critical mass in Guilford County with volunteerism in our county fire system. The reason it's been able to operate very effectively since the 1950s was the fact that we had a very strong volunteer base. We are seeing that volunteer base erode to the point that many of our departments are paying a number of their staff members, and the cost of fire protection is creeping up. And so right now, the tax rates in those individual districts goes anywhere from about 8 cents on the 100 up to about 13 cents on the 100. And if you make that as an equivalent to the city, you pay about 15 cents as a city resident for fire protection. Quite frankly, I think it's money pretty well spent. And if you've ever had a fire or been impacted by a fire, it's significant. And one of the things we always tell people and business owners, and everybody takes a shot at the fire marshal, why do they make you put sprinklers in a building? Gosh, it's expensive. After a fire, 90% of small businesses never reopen. Okay, so the ability to put a sprinkler in, and there's this misnomer that a sprinkler goes off and it just damages everything in the structure. If we were to have a fire in this room, it would probably put that fire out with less than 15 gallons out of a single head, and this business, this room, will be back operational later today. Okay, I promise you, Dennis will have this room back open. Okay, very, very quickly. All right, but ultimately in the county, much more longer response times, less volunteerism, etc. The average volunteer has to contribute about 350 hours a year in training plus call response. If you take somewhere that's becoming more urbanized like Summerfield, Summerfield last year ran 1,250 calls. That's too much volume for a volunteer service to support, so they are predominantly paid with a volunteer supplement. So big changes as we kind of move forward. We have a lot of issues on population that we're dealing with specifically. We are dealing with the aging of our population. We're dealing with the shifts of where people live. Obviously, one of the big drivers for us is skilled nursing facilities and retirement communities. And so as you build those, particularly as they're built in the counties, that creates quite a demand change for us. So one of our rural fire districts, last year, they were really excited because they built a new nursing home out in the eastern part of the county. And the next thing that happened was their call volume more than doubled. And ultimately, the tax base generated off of that one structure certainly didn't account for the cost increase in operating cost of that particular facility. Auto accidents, they're happening every day. Every time that you pick up the paper, and this is one of the things I always tell everyone, when you pick up the paper and open it and you see some kind of event in this community, whether it be a law enforcement event, a fire event, a wreck, industrial entrapment, etc., EMS is the one agency that is at every one of them. We work very closely with our community partners, 23 fire departments and 6 police departments. And everybody's like, 6? Greensboro, High Point, the universities all have certified police. If you don't believe it, drive quickly on ACOM. The blue lights on that UNCG police car, those are real policemen. Okay, they wear a badge, have a gun, they will write you, cite you, etc. But we deal with the university cops as well, A&T, etc., High Point University, etc., and the town of Gibsonville. So Gibsonville is a municipality, has all municipal protection, etc. So our job is to take the worst of people's days and try to make them better. I'm not going to tell you that everything we do is successful, okay, but I will tell you that right now we are deemed as one of the best communities in the United States to have a heart attack. We put a system of care in place in 1996 that allowed us to acquire 12 lead EKGs in your living room to diagnose myocardial infarction, a heart attack, be able to transmit that to the hospital, but more importantly, a paramedic in your living room is the one that activates the cath lab and the interventional cardiologist, okay? And that person is the one that's going to save the muscle that's going to result in many of you having a very favorable outcome if you have a medical event. Within the last 3 years, cardiac arrest is the most significant event we run because the patient is clinically dead. We currently have a 47% resuscitation rate for patients that we attempt a resuscitation on within residences in Guilford County. You're going to find that if you go around the United States, that number compares very favorably with the Seattles of the world and anywhere else, metropolitan areas of the United States that you go. These are exceptionally well-trained providers. We're there on your behalf, and we're there to support the needs of this community. Really exciting stuff going on. Once a cardiac arrest patient is resuscitated, we also chill that patient. Okay, so they receive something called induced hypothermia. Pretty scary for the family. Patient doesn't remember it. Okay, but pretty scary for the family because they will chemically paralyze you, and they will cool your body temperature down to about 92 degrees and maintain that for somewhere between 24 and 36 hours. At that point, they will start to rewarm you. And what we have right now, which also I think is groundbreaking, 70% of those patients are discharged from Cone Health neurologically intact. 70%. That's an incredible number if you've ever worked around resuscitation science, because ultimately the national average is about 3%. Hospital discharge is less than 5%. So what we've been able to do here as a system of care is something that each of you should be very proud of. Little event we had one Sunday morning. I happened to be on call, and I live in Green Valley, so I live right in this area, and they dispatched me down on the interstate, and a little tractor trailer hit about 6 cars and then went off of I-85. This is I-85 on the upper portion of this screen, and dropped down below, and fortunately these are not trained rescue professionals. They dragged the driver of that truck from a burning vehicle. It was carrying hazardous materials. We had 6 patients pinned in vehicles on I-85 that the truck had run over, etc. And for me, that's a Sunday morning. Okay? For you, it's the worst event of your life, right? And so our job is to be there when the unexpected happens, and our job is to be there quickly and to exceed your expectations. With that being said, I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Would be interested to know Jim Pennerson was one of the representatives in 1992 at this club.
Jim Pennerson is the father of emergency transportation in Guilford County. I use the call sign that Mr. Pennerson used for a number of years, and I took care of Mr. Pennerson for a number of years as he had declining health. Truthfully, with the work of the county commissioners, Bob Shaw and several others that were very instrumental in the early 70s with Mr. Pennerson and with Mr. Witherspoon, really put us in the position that we're in today. We had some of the latest breaking technology in 1972, 73, 74, and for many of us, I'm a kid of the emergency era, so Johnny and Roy were Squad 51, and that's how we ended up in this. All that technology they used, we actually have at least one piece of it sitting in our office. And what we owe to Mr. Fennison and our predecessors can never be repaid. It was, and a trained professional. The National Registry of EMTs was brand new, where you could receive a national credential, and Mr. Fennison was on the original board of that group of National Registry folks. North Carolina has had kind of a storied past with trying to elevate medicine, particularly because of the politics of North Carolina and the heavy volunteer base, particularly in the east. But ultimately, the metropolitan areas in Guilford County has been very fortunate. We were the second paramedic service in the state of North Carolina. So the transition from EMT is 200 hours of training, paramedic is 2,000 plus hours of training, and we were some of the first in 1974 to have a fully paid paramedic system. We were the first fully paid system in North Carolina. Yes, sir.
No one would ever want to impede a fire truck or an ambulance on its way to help somebody, but what are the rules? What are you supposed to do?
Okay, so pull to the right, and that sounds so great, right?
Yeah.
Until you're locked up in 6 lanes of traffic and nowhere to go. Ultimately, we do understand that, but as you move to the right and lanes of travel move to the right, it allows us clear passage to the left. Occasionally, we have to navigate the other directions, but ultimately, for the protection of our drivers, we always try to stay to the driver's left. Difficult to do. If you'll blink your lights or hit your brakes, at least we know you heard us.
Yeah.
We do have some folks in this community that have some incredible basses in their car, and they'll never hear a siren, right? I mean, you're on their back bumper, and all you hear is boom. Question?
Yeah. You had mentioned earlier about being overwhelmed at one period. What is the triage method for prioritizing incoming calls? And second, kind of two-part is, obviously, people who are calling in tend to panic, calling for the person that's either unconscious or unable to make the call. What's the process for that person to communicate?
So there's a very striated process, and when the system became as overwhelmed as it did, then senior EMS administrators, my command staff, were the ones that were calling those patients back, asking very specific questions under the guidance of our medical director to determine where in the priority order those additional calls occur. Historically, we have mutual aid agreements. So if Guilford County runs out of ambulances, then Alamance will send some, and Rockingham will send some, etc. But I will tell you, those are incredibly under-resourced systems, and quite frankly, we send ambulances to them much more often than they send ambulances to us. So we have to go through that process. Then we will call the fire department to go out and check on a patient. If we're going to be delayed, we will send staff officers. One of the things I think we're exceptionally proud of is our entire command staff maintains full paramedic function. I've been a paramedic for 26 years. Part of what I love to do, as I'm an administrator, obviously that's what I do for a living, but I still deliver direct patient care every single week because, quite frankly, it revalidates a passion for something that I think you have to, as a caregiver, every so often take care of a patient. Other questions?
How do you keep abreast of all the road construction that's been going on? And specifically, I'm thinking about the southbound lanes of Battleground and narrowed down to 1 lane. I was actually in traffic southbound one day when an ambulance had to come down that way.
We wish that we had instantaneous notification of every impedance. We don't, but it's kind of interesting. One of these maps that I showed you had a lot of information on it. It doesn't do it real time, but as the ambulances move, we have GPS contact with them constantly. We have stored about 10 years of its data, and we have something called impedance monitor. So we can tell you by hour of day and day of week exactly where the choke points are in traffic in this community, and the computer routes our guys around it. So everything we have is computerized. When I get your call, I'm getting the information from 911 on a computer, actually very similar to the one I'm presenting on. It gives me a route, and it attempts to get me around those blockages, particularly if a road is going to be shut down. So for instance, Drawbridge Parkway, 4100 Wellsprings is right on the other side, and they are getting ready to shut that road down for 6 months to do the bridge overpass. That's a huge issue to us because we go to that facility, obviously, on a routine and regular basis. It's totally changing our entire response configuration so that we come in from Horse Pen Creek Road instead of coming in from the Battleground side. Now, with road construction that pops up, we're not able to respond quite as quickly to that, and therefore we do have some issues sometimes getting through traffic.
Jim, how do you go from handling these daily, events to considering something on a large scale, EMP strike, for example, or something that's not likely, but certainly going to be?
So right now, the majority of our attention, we do have things like mass casualty ambulances here. So we have a bus that will transport 16 stretcher patients, etc. We're very fortunate, received it through some federal funding because we had to do weapons of mass destruction training starting post 9/11. So we did a lot of that type of preparedness. Right now, our preparedness is focused on active shooter. The biggest concern that we have in this community for mass casualty is for somebody to walk into a place of business or to walk into a school and to exact the kind of carnage that we've seen occur around the United States. So we historically, right, we're the medical guys, no guns here. We stay back and wait until the police clear an issue. Well, the reality is we're now training rapid intervention teams from EMS to enter with law enforcement into a structure with the gunmen still there, because we need to get to the patients, because after Virginia Tech it was very clear that a number of those patients may have been able to be resuscitated had they had medical care to them quicker. So are my guys super excited about this? This is the next training next month, right? We're going to do school shooters. And we're going to have the cops in there firing sim rounds at you. And they're like, are you kidding me? I didn't sign on for this. But the reality is that's where we are. And public safety has to constantly be monitoring that. Whether it be hazardous materials, whether it be weapons of mass destruction, whether it be mass shooter, whether it be heroin. So the newest thing that's hit us, and y'all may have seen a press release we did last week, we've run over 50 heroin overdoses this month where EMS has been involved. And of those, over half of them were not breathing. And of those, about a dozen still had the needle in their arm when we arrived. Okay? There is a new form of heroin out that is the most powerful that has ever hit the streets. It's actually mixed with a synthetic compound. And we are seeing people that are chronic users, not first-time users, chronic users of heroin now overdosing. And there's a huge, huge change in the way that we're having to think. We've put the narcotic antagonist now on every fire truck in this system, and we soon will be adding narcotic antagonists to law enforcement officers as well to try to stop what is currently going on. And did I anticipate heroin coming back? That's a drug of the 70s. Come on. And we're seeing usage right now at one of the highest levels we've ever seen in history.
Jim, two questions. When you respond in a dangerous situation where there's fire, a shooter, are your men wearing vests?
Yes, so Greensboro has a very storied history with violence. Goes back to November the 3rd of 1979, and we were provided vests on November 4th of 1979. That's true. And we have maintained personal issued ballistic armor for our paramedics ever since. And I will tell you that a number of my providers now routinely, particularly those that work evenings, have a tendency to wear armor just as a police officer does. It's an unfortunate statement, because I will tell you, years ago, I could have gone into the most drug-infested, worst areas of Greensboro. We could have run a shooting. I could have come in there, and literally it was a parting of the seas because we were there to help. Now I'm seen as an official, right? We wear uniforms and etc., and there's not the same appreciation within many of our communities that there probably was. And truthfully, we deal with a very young population that's involved in violent crime. I had an opportunity, and this is just one of those sobering things that you learn when you're in government. I was meeting with our Court Alternatives Juvenile Detention Director about a week ago. And I said something about, well, what's your patient census in the Juvenile Detention Center, and et cetera. And he said, we're almost full because we're a regional center and we're taking people from all over the state. I said, well, you know, what are they in there for? He said, I've got a 14-year-old in right now that is being held on a triple homicide. And I said, what? He said he was involved in a gang. They went into a convenience store. He had to do a robbery as his initiation to the gang. He panicked and he executed the family that ran the convenience store, mom, dad, and cousin. that ran that particular convenience store. A 13-year-old, okay, not processing rational thought, a kid that really grew up in a tough environment, etc. Ultimately, mom had him when she was 13, pregnant at 12, and he ended up in a gang lifestyle. That impacts us, okay? That kind of things in our community impact all of us. And so, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on out there that is pretty scary.
Yeah. Was that Officer Logan? Is he still juvenile facility?
Doug Logan?
Yeah, yes.
And if you ever want a great speaker, Doug Logan will come
Oh my
in and
gosh.
make you thankful every day that you raised your children the way you did. You will go home and hug them and kiss them and never want to let them out of your sight again when he tells the stories. But he's a very powerful guy as far as trying to turn children
Absolutely.
into a positive direction and keep them in education, etc.
And Officer Cuthbertson too.
Yep, absolutely.
I want a question about the Ready Guilford and the rapid intervention. Is there a Twitter handle or like something, if there's something massive happening in Greensboro or social media that we can follow?
Ready Guilford feeds to both Facebook and Twitter very actively. We are very connected to social media because, quite frankly, if you're going to reach my teenage children, it better be on Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat. So we are going that way. So if you'll go to Ready Guilford when you register, you'll automatically have the links available to you.
And I wanted to make one comment, and my husband was in the 47% that had the cardiac arrest that may have not made it, and Jonathan knows because, you know, good Rotarians show up on your porch at 2 a.m. in the morning in their bathing suit. But he actually had the Arctic Sun procedure. For those new members of the club in 2012, he had the Arctic Sun procedure. He was frozen, thawed out. We didn't know what we were going to get, and he's one of the the good percentage.
The good percentage.
Yes.
And we're hearing lots of those stories. In fact, we happen to just be featured in a national video, and we were picked as one of the resuscitation centers of excellence in the United States. And so I have a professional film crew here from California, and my secretary calls and says, we've got a guy at the front desk who wants to talk to you about the care he received from EMS. So I'm thinking that's the dissatisfied that you always hear from customer. And I walked up front, and he was a cardiac arrest save. He and his wife, it was as if we had planned it. And he now is the feature of our video. He literally walked in and he said, I was dead and y'all brought me back to life, and I'd just like to say thanks. The funny thing is that we rarely hear from that patient. It's really a strange dichotomy of the world we live in. We hear from everyone when the bill arrives, okay, but we rarely hear from the others. Any other questions? I'll be happy to stay afterwards if anyone has a question that I didn't have a chance to answer.
Thank you.
We're going to donate a book to Coney Elementary. I've inscribed it with today's date and your name. If you would please draw a ticket here, read the last 3 digits for our raffle. Don't forget those blue cart fund buckets on your table for Alzheimer's.
Okay, so I'm an older guy. Oh, 766.
666?
766.
All right. Have a great day.